We are the first generation in our country's history to be worse off than our parents. And that is crazy, right? The first generation in our country's history to be worse off than our parents. And that didn't used to be normal. It really didn't. 40 hours a week was supposed to cover more than the basics. And we keep coming back to that because we're not asking for freaking luxury here. The basics is what we need. And if you're working 40 hours a week, then your job should cover the basics. That shouldn't be a controversial thing to say. But because they've made keeping us broke the norm, then as soon as you talk about not having the basics, it's like it's our fault. And that's why we drop the me's in the chat. So put a me in the chat if you are feeling this, because we are broke on purpose. They don't let us have savings because that if we had savings, that means we'd have leverage. And with leverage, we'd actually be able to strike and boycott. There we go, CM. Because strikes and boycotts only work if we have leverage, right? If we're dependent on them, then we are never going to be able to demand change. We can only ask for it. And this didn't used to be something we had to deal with. This is what's crazy, is that this only recently started happening. And all we're asking is one simple question. Why can somebody do everything right, work their ass off, and still fall farther behind? It didn't used to be something that 80% of Americans had to deal with, right? So what is it though? Because the truth is that if people don't have money, the people in charge have leverage over us. Because if you don't have savings, like 6 months of savings, like 40, 50 grand in the bank account, you're stuck working that crappy job. You're stuck accepting a lower salary than you should. And you don't have the leverage to say no, because you have to keep working there if you want a paycheck to buy food the next week, if you want a paycheck to cover your housing the week after that. We don't have leverage to negotiate. That's why we feel so stressed. You can do everything right and still fall farther behind. There are people working 40 hours a week for companies that make billions with a B. And those employees still have to go on housing assistance and medical assistance. And that's because the people up top are taking more than their fair share. Good to see you here, Caleb. And that's where the problem is, that something feels off. Everyone's working harder, and we all feel pressure from the system, but we blame different things. That's something we should be looking at. Why do we all blame different things? It's not because we're missing the real reason, right? It's because we're broke on purpose. We don't have leverage. If you're broke on purpose, people that are broke don't have leverage, right? And without leverage, you can't strike, you can't boycott. You can only ask for change. You can never demand it. And what's so crazy is when we don't get ahead, they act like it's a personal failure. They act like it is our fault, right? And what's crazy is that when we talk about it, we reinforce the idea that it's our fault or the individual's fault. But that's not what reality is. 80% of people don't have savings. That's 208 million people who are working full time and still are barely scraping by. And that's because we're broke on purpose. They keep us broke because no savings means no leverage. And if we don't have leverage, we can't say no. And then what do we hear from other people, right? They tell you, oh, that person should have just worked harder. Like, what? Oh, that person should just budget better. No, the average cost of living and the average salary is about the same. So how can you just tell people to budget better when their salaries are literally not keeping up with the cost of living. And it's like a rigged carnival game. You walk up to this carnival game going, all right, I practiced, I worked hard, I prepared for this. And completing that carnival game is a rite of passage. In America, making your own way is a rite of passage. But then we are not able to make our own way. And the people that got the secret lies, right? They all say, well, what's wrong with you? You're doing something wrong. You're causing problems. But later you realize the game was rigged all along. And that's what's so crazy. We all feel this pressure. We all feel this isolation. Basically, when we're one step from financial ruin, we are living in fear of that financial ruin. And because we're living in fear, that makes us easy to divide. That's what this is. The majority of Americans don't have savings. If we don't have savings, we're afraid of being in financial ruin. We're terrified of being homeless. We're terrified of not providing for ourselves or our family. So when we're terrified and afraid, that makes us easy to divide. But what's crazy is we are the economy. We are the ones that do all the hard work. The rich people that make all the money, they need us, right? That's what's so crazy, is that we're the ones that do the work. They don't make the food, like they're not the farmers, right? We're the ones that are the farmers. So I think what we really need to figure out, One-Armed King, is some better language, because everybody believes in these working class ideals, but they have taken most of our progressive sayings and poisoned them against people. Say, eat the rich. What about end corporate welfare, right? That's how we've got to come ahead and understand that everything we used to see, everything we use to talk about progress, they've poisoned against us. Summerfast, that is so great, because that's what we see when people sit down and say, I'm not going to play this rigged game anymore. That's where the apathy comes in. And then the system turns it on its head. When somebody says, look, I am going to sit down. I'm not going to play this rigged game anymore. What does the system say? Oh, look, they're lazy, right? Oh, look, they're lazy. So Caleb, I would push back against that. The reason we are so stuck is because we are no longer customers, because we are consumers. I'd say that they've worked very hard to make sure that the consumer base can't go anywhere else. Or they at least make it much more difficult for the consumer base to use an alternative. And that's the reason that we're stuck. But we will always have money to consume. They'll always give us just enough to pay for food, to pay for housing, to pay for healthcare. That's the rig. That's the game. They will always give us just enough to pay for those things, because they know if they give us less, that's when we start really getting angry. And if they give us more, that's when we have leverage. They have found this sweet spot where they give us $200 more a week than what we need. And because that $200 a week, we don't want to lose that shit. We've got our food, we've got our housing, we've got our healthcare. And yeah, we've only got $200 a week, but I'm not doing anything else because I'm in a precarious position right here. And I'm not going to do anything to mess with that, right? And then most of us don't have the ability to say no. We don't have the money for striking. We don't have the options for leverage, right? So, and this is why nothing changes. If people don't have savings, we can't demand change. And if we can't demand change, that means we don't have any real power, right? So we literally just have to take what they say. And we've been in that position for 20 or 30 years. Patrick, it says median. The median. So Summerfest, what we are doing is understanding that and we are telling people the house is on fire. But rather than arguing left versus right, whether we're going to paint the house red or blue, we are actually going to focus on the structural issues that are happening. Because what this group is really for is sort of for people who are like, all right, we protested, we did what we should. What comes next, right? What comes next? What are we going to do to actually force their hand? Because it was great that we came together to protest. But if we all go and buy our groceries from the very same people we protested against, it's not going to do much, right? We have got to figure out a long-term solution. And the long-term solution is creating alternatives, community-based alternatives. That's really what it is. Yeah, Kayla, we are really trying to partner with unions in this. So locally based alternatives, because here's what we need. Summerfest, that's actually, we've got this. So let me talk through it right now. So voting doesn't work because politicians don't work for us anymore. Politicians work for the corporations. Politicians only work for the people that pay their campaign financing. So for a while, the corporations have been ran, or the politicians have been ran by the corporations. So protesting doesn't work because that only gets the politicians to listen. So what we need to do is be able to boycott and strike, because that's just using our leverage. Boycotting is leverage over where you spend your money. Striking is leverage over where you work. So what we need to do is understand that the mass action is incredibly important. I'm not saying that we need to stop protesting and stop rallying, but we do need to look at protesting and rallying as the very first step. It's not like protesting and rallying does anything, right? It used to when politicians worked for the people, but now that the politicians work for corporations, rallying and protesting, it is a great show of solidarity. Doesn't change the laws, right? And actually what we're even finding out is that better leaders and better members of Congress, they're not actually in charge either. Who would have thought? The people that control our food are the ones in charge. A nation runs on its stomach. Everybody in Congress can have the exact same idea, but if they are still kowtowing to the corporations and those corporations want to screw us over, that's the issue, right? Corporations don't care about you. Corporations screw you over. So flaming hot, what we've got to figure out, or at least what I believe, is that as soon as we stop fighting over left versus right, they then get us fighting about the name of the system, right? So I don't name any systems because I think it's silly to pigeonhole ourselves, because as I said earlier, any words of progress, any language that communicates progress, they have poisoned against us. Shit, man, unions made this country. You say unions to a bunch of working class people now, and they will be like, oh, screw unions, because they've been brainwashed, right? They've been lied to. And what we really need to do is not get mad at the people that have been brainwashed. Let's get mad at the people doing the brainwashing. So when people are upset about this and that, we don't need to follow it, because there's a couple different things. We are born into this system that automatically sorts us into competitive. Summerfest, unless we get the corporate grip off of the corporate states of America, we could change the Constitution as much as we want. Like, this is what I guess I don't understand about that comment. We've got laws on the books that they are actively breaking. So that's where I don't get why the Constitution would do better if they are flaunting the Constitution right now. We are still playing this game that the old rules apply. That if we just get enough people, if we just change the Constitution, they'll follow it. They literally aren't following the current Constitution. So, and then they'll just be like, what, this new law put in by a Biden judge? It was Obama plant. We're not following this, right? So as long as we are in a position where we have to ask, pretty please change. Could you stop? Could you please stop? Right? but we don't have any leverage to force them to change. That's it. But Alan, what happens when the majority of people working for the pyramid scheme want it to keep going? Not because the pyramid scheme works for them, because that's the only place they've ever worked, right? And then this is really what it is. It's like we've all lived in this house, and this house isn't great, but we don't know about any other house. We've never seen another house. So, Alan, when we tell most people time for something better, they're like, but this is the only house I know. I can't even imagine something better. A bartering economy? What? We've always had money. Yeah, it can be the same thing. Remember how we used to joke about if you couldn't afford your food, you'd have to go wash dishes? Well, that actually works. People that need food, it's called time banking now, right? It's the same thing. And El Banco, I appreciate you dropping that me, because we dropped the me's in the chat because they act like you're the problem, right? Stock prices go up and up and up. Salaries stay the same. Blanco, you're busting your ass 40 hours a week. And then what do they say? Oh, you should have worked harder. Oh, you should have budgeted better, right? You should just move somewhere else. It's insane. And that's where we're broke on purpose. We are broke on purpose. Because if we don't have any savings, that means we don't have leverage. The way I describe that is you can't say no. Could you quit your job tomorrow? Could you quit your job on Monday? We'll say you have a really shitty job. Could you quit it? Well, if the answer is no, then you're stuck, right? Could you go to the grocery store and buy anything that you wanted? Or is how you experience freedom you budgeting tightly so that you can afford enough to eat, right? So why is it? Why is it that the cost of living is the same as the average salary? Because there's no competition. That's it. There's no competition in America today. When you walk into Walmart and Walmart doesn't pay their employees enough to smile at you, what are you going to do? Go to their non-corporate competitor, right? They know you're not going to walk out. Home Depot, same way. You can walk in there. Their employees roll their eyes at you or run the other way. And now, if they had competition, the corporation would be like, oh, we need to pay these employees enough to care. We need to pay these employees enough so that they actually smile at customers. But because we cannot walk out, right? We cannot walk out and just go shop somewhere else. They have completely dominated us. So that's where there's no more Mike's General Store. There's no more Deb's Hardware Store. There's no more local pharmacies, local newspapers. What else is gone? Local banks, local doctors' offices, all those things gone, right? Or if they're there, there's not that many of them that they can actually compete, right? And so we're all stuck inside. So that's where everybody feels, I can't leave, I can't get ahead, shit, I can barely breathe, right? And that's where Mariah, this group is actually built in that. That's what this group is doing. We are recognizing that corporations are nothing but middlemen. We all know it, right? We just haven't had a way to overcome them because they have their claws in everything. But politicians are just middlemen. Beaverino, taxing will not work. Anything that is a legislative fix will be stalled by the people in power. Those would be the politicians. The politicians work for the corporations. So the politicians will never tax the rich for stronger social middle class because they would be taxing their literal bosses to pay for the people that they view as peons. We're the peons, the billionaires are the bosses. So we don't need to figure out how to make the politicians listen. We need to figure out how to beat the billionaires. And that's what this is. So how do you beat a corporation? Well, number one, we realize the corporations don't actually do anything, right? The food that you eat was grown by somebody that lives in your county, that lives in your zip code, right? That's what happened. So the person that grows food lives in your county, lives in your zip code. You're somebody that wants to eat food. You live in that same county. Damn, but somehow the corporations take all the profits? That's weird. Well, let's move to something else. What about healthcare? There's somebody in your zip code that's either a doctor or nurse or healthcare provider that wants to give you quality healthcare at an affordable price. You want quality healthcare. You want it at an affordable price, but somehow the corporations take all the money and they make it hard because they control access. They do not create anything. We are the economies. We are the ones that actually do the hard work. Because what is the economy, right? The economy is just a bunch of companies. And the companies need their workers. You can have a factory, but unless you have 1,000 workers to help run that factory, you ain't got shit. And that's where it's so crazy, because we are the ones that do all the hard work. But working hard isn't enough anymore. You also have to be born to the right person, right? That's what it really comes down to. The zip code you're born into, the people that you know, your social circle, right? It's insane. Effort does not lead to stability anymore. And so that's why it feels like we're all standing in a fog. Because we followed the rules that have been laid out in front of us for 50 years. Every single person, whether you were born in 1970, 1980, or 1990, what were we all told? Work hard, study, put your nose down, and you'll get ahead. Drop a me in the chat if you were told that. And that shit didn't pan out. Because damn, it was all of us. We were told the same thing. How can 80% of people? Because, Happy Lad, it's demoralizing because they take away our goddamn dignity. My God, when you work 8 hours a day and they pay you $40, you feel like shit, right? When you're working 40 hours a week and you go to buy a house and you still can't afford to live, you feel like shit. So maybe you stop working your ass off so hard. Well, Alan, that's what it is. The 1% broke the deal. And we all feel it. And the deal is that if we work for you, because what is a job? A job is a rich person trying to get richer. A job is offered for 2 reasons and 2 reasons only. Because the owner sees a way to make more money. But the owner either does not have the time or they do not have the motivation to do the job that it takes to make more money. So you are either buying your time back or you are purchasing more profit. So that person who is making you money or buying your time back, they deserve enough to live, not out of some moral sense of right and wrong, but because if that person isn't paid enough to live, we all cover the costs. Shit, man, we were just talking about it. Somebody works at Walmart. Walmart makes $10 billion. A large percentage of Walmart employees cannot afford housing. But we need to take this one step further. If that Walmart employee can't afford housing and they're already working 40 hours a week, they've only got 2 options, right? Go on public assistance, in which case we all pay for it, right? Or don't have housing. But this is why companies like Walmart hold housing, public assistance trainings to show their employees how to go on public assistance, right? And this is not the Walmart fault, right? That's what's so funny. There it is. We were almost waiting for it. Ashley, we appreciate that. But those people don't have any leverage. So here's what happens. The people up top know that if we don't have any money, they have leverage over us, right? Real leverage. Because if you don't have any savings, how are you going to find another job? If you don't have 1 month, 3 months of savings, if you are depending on that paycheck for your rent, how are you going to find another job? That's all it really asks. And then, doesn't Walmart intentionally underpay us so we do have to depend on that paycheck? Then, when we say, well, this isn't enough, they say, find another job. And it's like, but if I miss even 1 day interviewing, I'm not going to have enough for rent. Or if I miss a day, we're getting a new skill, my kids won't have enough to eat. So people can't make the decision to better their life until they have a little bit of wiggle room. Because if you've only got $500 in the bank account, are you going to risk it all to hopefully get a new job? It's like hanging on to a life raft. You can see a bigger ship in the distance, but shit, you got to let go of that white life raft. You got to swim to this other ship, and you don't even know if that other ship will be better than the situation that you left. We could take it even further. Maybe the person that is working at Walmart was born to a Walmart employee rather than a Walmart general manager. And since Walmart employees don't make a ton of money, that person might not have gotten a great education because for some reason in our country, the quality of your education is dependent on the price of the house you are born into. That's kind of weird. Not weirder than health insurance companies that actively don't let us live, but the fact that we have education that is completely dependent on the price of the house you are born to kind of seems like it's rigged. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but it sure seems like effort isn't what matters. It's who you are born to. So because it's over 100 groups now, gas station, themassblackout.com. So there's 100 different groups. Summerfast, not at all. It only feels hopeless if you think that this is the way things have always been. And if you were born in the late 70s, 80s, or 90s, this is for you the way things have always been. But I can promise you it wasn't always like this. We used to go to local markets before we had grocery stores. We used to have local hardware stores, right? That's used to be part of it. And the competition used to keep the corporations in check. We are not crazy, but we are also not hopeless. Because as we talked earlier, we are still the ones that do everything. We're the ones that grow the food, right? We're the ones that grow the food. We're the ones that eat the food. We are the doctors. We are the nurses. We are the healthcare providers. We're also the ones that need healthcare. All corporations really are our middlemen. There's us over here that want food and goods and services. There are people on this side that want food and goods and services, right? What we need to do is stop going through the corporations and go around them, right? Go around the corporations. We don't need to get our food from grocery stores. We can set it up that we get it from the local farmer. Because this is essentially like a bulk ordering group, a food distribution, a local food distribution, because we don't always have to get it from grocery stores. And the crazy thing about leverage is we don't need to take back all of our leverage. We just need to take as much leverage, a little bit of leverage that force them to listen to us. That's what this is. We are forcing them to live to us. Because Mariah, that's the case because we got 80% of companies, over 85% of corporations on the S&P 500 have the same 3 top shareholders. That's what it is. Over 85% of corporations have the same 3 top shareholders. Yup. The situation you're born in determines your life, because your education really determines your salary in a lot of cases, because the skills you have, think of whether you were taught that you can do anything or whether you were taught that this is all you can do. That really determines a lot of your life, right? So Meows Kitty, that is so true, but we've got to build people up to that, because the way that we see it happening is we need to start 1 million small businesses that eventually turn into local businesses and co-ops. And those small businesses won't try to defeat the corporations overnight. What we will try to do, though, is show people in our community that we care more. Hey, right now we're only selling eggs, but we care more. So come buy our eggs from us instead of the corporations, because the less dependent we are, the more power we have. Miss Mia, that is great. We do need to stop working. Striking is the most important thing we have. And boycotting is really important too. But what we're talking about is that we don't have leverage. We have no leverage whatsoever. And striking requires leverage over where your hard work goes. Boycotting requires leverage over where your money goes. And when corporations are the ones that employ 70 and 80% of us, and then they make us depend on that job. Well, they've got a lot of leverage over us. We don't have enough leverage to strike. Because the other thing that we need for striking is to save, have money in savings. We need to have at least 3 months of savings. We need to have at least 6 months of savings. Because that's the only way that the majority of people feel comfortable to say, screw this, right? I am not working anymore. Mia, people need savings in order to feel comfortable to do that. Otherwise, a strike is a leap of faith rather than a logical next step, right? That's what it is. Oh, I'm sorry, MOC. We got somebody whose feelings hurt in TikTok. So we're just saying that corporations don't care about you. We think it's weird that health insurance companies try to not provide us with health care, that the companies that make food, that they're the ones that try to not give us quality food, but actually give us whatever will keep us addicted and buying their product. So Caleb, we build that security by taking back options. We just need competition again. Imagine if we had every single Walmart parking lot had yard sales and swap meets, right? Every single grocery store should have farmers markets, because then when we go into those corporations and they treat us poorly, we can walk our asses right back out and go to their competitor. But that's where a lot of this problem comes from right now, is that when we go into a corporation, we cannot walk our asses out. I mean, and here's what it is: conveniently and easily, right? We're not going to go drive 20 or 30 minutes out of our way to go to the local grocery store. We need to bring the farmers market to the parking lots of the corporations. We're not going to drive 30 minutes out of our way to go to the hardware store. The corporations have literally made sure that the majority of people have to drive 20 minutes out of their way to go to the local grocery store, to go to the local hardware store. So what we are doing is we're not going to beat them on scale. But if we need to take back leverage by taking back power, so that's part of it. If we need to take back leverage by taking back power, then we also need to build like the leverage. And that's what local alternatives are. And that's really the keystone to everything, is having these local alternatives. So let me pull this up, because Caleb, what you said is so correct, but it got me thinking about this, where this is one of the items that we have, is that basically we have to build this pyramid collectively as a country. So as soon as people realize the problem is there, they start speaking out. Then Caleb, exactly what you said, right? People start changing their personal choices. So those things are great, right? So what we've got is people speaking out, then people change their personal choices. But then we realize no matter how much we change our lifestyle, we always have to buy our electricity from corporations. No matter how much we change our lifestyle, we've got to buy our internet from corporations. No matter how much we change our lifestyle, the majority of people need cars, and all cars come from corporations. Right? So that's where we really need to understand that corporations dominate us, right? So that's where we start speaking out. Then we change our choices, and then we go, oh shit, no matter what I do, I am not going to be able to change my personal choices enough to make to have leverage. Basically, yeah. We only build leverage with the top two. And then even then, leverage is only built when the top two are reciprocal. That's what it's all about, is that we need to be speaking out. Then once people speak out and realize, I want to do more, they start changing their habits. Once people realize, I want to do more, but what do? They're like, well, I need to speak out. And, I need to start putting pressure on the system. So they start putting pressure. And then a lot of times that's where we stop, because in the past, politicians would listen to us. But because politicians don't work for us anymore and they work for the corporations, we can't just stop at protesting and applying pressure. We also have to start building alternatives, because if we want to boycott, we literally have to have an alternative to go to. Like right now, if we wanted alternatives to corporate cars, we don't have any, right? We cannot buy a vehicle that is not from a corporation. So we just don't want to get in that same situation with our food, with our housing, with our healthcare, right? That's really the issue, is that we need control over the things we need to live. Because if we don't have control over the things we need to live, they are able to keep us dependent. And if we are dependent on them, then we are stuck. And we've already talked about, if we don't have any money, if we don't have any leverage, then there's nothing that we can do. And then it comes back to, if 10 million of us protested tomorrow, the next day we still have to buy groceries from the same corporations, pay our electric bills to the same corporations, pay a rent into the same corporations, right? So protesting without building alternatives is kind of like a 10-year-old telling their parents, I'm going to run away from home. And the parents just laugh because the kid is dependent on them. That's where we are. The people that control our food control us. The people that control our medicine control us. So if we want real leverage, we have to reduce our dependency even just a little. It doesn't have to be a ton. Absolutely, Caleb. It needs to be recruiting grounds. So if you like that, last one, I've got another little visual here that can show what we need to do at these protests. Because what they should be showing is right here. Yeah, Caleb, I've never heard of teach-ins. So all actions support the other. This is exactly what we need. Right now, we've got mass actions here. They are that dark green loop. Those mass actions, they should lead to more connections. So mass actions to more connections. More connections allows us to find local groups, local alternatives. Those local alternatives, they allow us to actually strike and boycott. Because remember, you can't boycott unless you can go somewhere else. And then the ability to actually effectively strike and boycott gets us to do even more mass actions. And then we've started the feedback loop over again. So basically, long-term actions set the table by organizing them. Then when people come along, they participate in this immediate action that has instant impact, but they're also recruiting and bringing in new people. So it's like we've got people that want to do immediate stuff and they're able to do something in the next 30 days. We got people that are planning long-term things, and some people will participate in those long-term plannings. Either way, when you have the mass action, whether it's a boycott, strike, whatever, then what you do is we're working to recruit people, bring new people in. Because recruiting and bringing in new people lead to more people planning those long-term actions, right? And planning more long-term actions starts the loop all over again. And that's what this is, the momentum loop. We start with mass action. We build for more connection, more alternatives. And what this really is it allows us to not to say no, right? It allows us to say no, to not have to use their system. Because that's the problem right now, right? Somebody even said it. Why don't they just go get another job, right? Well, it's not about getting another job, because that job will also just try to screw you over. It really is the people that do the hard work, right? Versus the people that control everything. And all they really do is take advantage of us, even though they need us in order to get rich. So what they've done is they've made us dependent on them. They've taken away our ability to have savings. The average salary and the average cost of living is about the same. And so when 40 hours a week doesn't cover the basics anymore, that's not done just so that people up top can pad their pockets. It's because if regular everyday Americans don't have savings, then we're stuck. You have to keep working that crappy job. You don't have the leverage to say no to a boss that's taking advantage of you. You can't even negotiate for a higher salary, because why would the boss pay you more when they know you are stuck, right? And then we make it feel like it is our fault. They make us feel like it is our fault. So Caleb, one of the ways that we can reduce that rent seeking is it's called localism. That's essentially the idea that this is localism, that things work better, that when the people that run shit, both in politics and in economy, that the whole system works better when people are local to the systems that they run. The corporations actually used to care about us because that person that started the corporation 40 and 50 years ago was a part of our community. So they knew if they screwed over Miss Jenkins, that they could be seeing her in the line at the grocery store, that they'd be seeing them in the pickup line to get their kids from school. So they'd be held accountable, and they're terrified of being held accountable. That's why they put in these layers of insulation so they can just hide from all of their decisions. So localism is what holds people accountable. Because here's what it is, Caleb. Say you've got somebody who is selling their food, right? They're a local food distributor. Once you've got 10 people that you're selling to every single week, maybe you're making 15, 20 bucks, right? You're hardly doing anything. You're making 20 bucks. Then the 11th person is like, hey, I don't have money to pay every week. I can pay every other week. Do you think there's a way that I could help you run this food buying group and I could help get some food from doing that? And you can be like, oh yeah, these people pay. We buy it from the farmer and we'll just make sure that we'll get you one extra or something like that. And you can take it home. So then there's that small business that, because that small business is local to the community, they're able to do this time banking and different things like that, right? It is so insane. And that's where we've got to understand that a fellow, I'd love to tell you about that later, is where it's so funny that we don't understand is that they've got this control over us. And that's where, Caleb, it's the social contract, right? That's where a fellow uses that same phrase. Paladin used it up on YouTube, and it's they broke the social contract. The social contract is that when somebody offers a job, that job is, I know we got to figure out Discord too. That job is the person in charge trying to make more money. They're trying to get richer. Or if they're not making more money, they want somebody else to do their job. They're trying to buy back their time, right? So when somebody offers a job, they're trying to make more money. They're trying to get some of their own time back. So a job is actually like a contract. Like, yeah, I'll come make you money if you make sure I'm taken care of. Because you don't want a worker that is like worried about where their housing comes from every single day, right? That's what it is. So if we don't have enough savings, if 40 hours a week doesn't cover it anymore, that's because the social contract that was a job isn't a two-way street anymore. It only works for one person, the owner, right? That's what's crazy. But because we're born into this system, anybody born after like 1970 has only known the corporate states of America, because this system is the only one we've ever known. We don't realize the social contract is broken. Because the social contract should be every single employee in America makes enough to have like 20 grand in savings. That's what it is. Absolutely, Caleb. The way I like to get us there is say, what's the point of, you said it earlier and I wanted to bring this up. What's the point of a society? Is it so a couple people can get really, really rich while we all do the hard work? Or is it so that the majority of people can achieve security? Is it so that the majority of people have all their needs met so they are able to live up to their fullest potential? Because all it really is you've got two options when setting up a society, right? It's to make food and housing and healthcare so unbelievably easy to achieve that everyone in that society is able to obtain food and housing and healthcare at almost like no cost. So then everyone in that society is not worried about their housing, is not worried about their food, and is not worried about their healthcare. So people might say, oh, golly, if they don't have to work for the things they need to live, what would actually motivate them to work? Well, humans want to do things. It's just that in this society where we feel so stressed and crunched 40 hours a week, the moment that we are done having to work for what we need to survive, we collapse on the couch, right? So it feels like, oh, so if all those things were just given to us, we would collapse on the couch all the time? No, not at all. The moment our battery is recharged, people that have their food and housing and healthcare taken care of, they want to go better their community, right? If you're not working, if you don't have to work for money, if you didn't need any money for your food, your housing, and your healthcare, and that was all taken care of, think deeply about what you would do, right? Probably spend a couple days recharging, re-energizing, but then you'd be like, all right, I'm sick of that. I want to do something to better my community, better my world, better myself. It's better, right? You're thinking in terms of progress, because when your cup is full, you're not worried if it's going to stay full. When you know it'll stay full, then you start to try to fill the cups of others, right? We wonder why there hasn't been any, innovation in America since the god dang iPhone. And that's because we don't need to, right? Number one, the people who create the innovation are stuck in their doldrum of jobs, right? But really, we don't have to innovate anymore. So we've got a space where we all come together as a community. The Discord link is in the bio. And we'll be finding the new place soon once they implement their draconian laws, possibly. And that's where we've just got to understand that we are broke on purpose, because no savings means no leverage. And if we can't strike or boycott and we don't have any leverage, nothing ever changes. We're all working harder than ever and still falling farther behind. But that is only the case because we're broke on purpose, because the people in charge know if you don't have 3 months of savings, you can't strike. If you don't have a bunch of non-corporate options around you, you can't boycott. You can only ever ask for change. You can't force it. And if we are asking for change from the very same people that set up this situation, it's never going to come. So what we need to do, Discord link is in the bio. We are building a community to overcome this. I'm going to hop down and hop back up, y'all. I'll see you in a minute.